The federal government is under pressure over its immigration policy as the banks come under political pressure to suspend branch closures. While many companies are facing weaker demand, pubs are booming, and the real highlight of yesterday's SuperBowl. It's Tuesday, the 14th of February, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and happy Valentine's Day, Sean Aylmer.
Happy Valentine's Day right back at you. Let's just leave the listeners wondering about that one.
All right. Now, immediately after the show, Sean, you've got a chat coming up with Cameron Harris, who is the global leader of Flight Centre Business Travel. This is a good one.
Yes, it's all about the return of business travellers. It's happening. We're not quite back to full capacity, but Cameron gives us an insight into where Flight Centre's up to and just when we can expect them to be back full on. It's a really interesting chat because obviously corporate travel is a really major part of business, not just for the airlines, but for people like Flight Centre and others. So it's a fascinating chat.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, the federal government is under pressure over its border protection policy after abolishing temporary protection visas, which the opposition says could trigger a surge in asylum seeker votes.
Yeah, so Labor promised before last year's election to abolish temporary protection visas, and now they've done so. Around 19,000 refugees who have been in Australia for up to 10 years will be able to apply for a newly created permanent residency visa with family reunion rights and a path to citizenship from today. The Rudd government abolished temporary protection visas back in 2008, but they were reintroduced by the coalition as one of the three pillars of the military-led Operation Sovereign Borders program. The whole idea was to deter asylum seekers from arriving by boat. Now, the Albanese government supports the other two planks of that Operation Sovereign Borders policy, so they're boat turnbacks and offshore processing. Yesterday, frontbencher Bill Shorten said the government was committed to ensuring no one who arrived in Australia by boat without a valid visa would be allowed to stay. But opposition spokesperson for immigration, Dan Tan, among many others, have warned that granting permanent visas could actually revive the people smuggling trade. Very, very hard issue, this one.
Yeah, it sure is. And now, Sean, yesterday was the 15th anniversary of the apology to the stolen generation, and it was marked by the release of the Closing the Gap Implementation Plan report.
Yeah, so there's plenty of talk about the apology in the House. Yesterday, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called it his proudest moment in the chamber. Opposition leader Peter Dutton apologised for choosing not to attend back in 2008, saying back then he failed to grasp the symbolic significance of the apology. Following the release of the Closing the Gap report yesterday, the government promised more than $420 million in new federal funding for the provision of clean water, food supply and improved housing for Indigenous Australians. Michael, it's funny, when I heard that announcement yesterday, $420 million for clean water, food supply and improved housing, they're basics. Like, they're just taken for granted by most Australians.
Yeah, that's something that we would entirely expect just to be able to receive every single day.
Staggering.
Indeed. And Sean, the banks are feeling the political heat.
Yes, they are. Yesterday, the Commonwealth Bank said it would pause any regional bank branch closures while a parliamentary inquiry is held later this year. Now, the Senate inquiry is responding to the announced closure of more than 80 branches across cities and regions since September last year. Of course, we know the banks are also under political pressure about not passing on higher deposit rates following the increase in the Reserve Bank official cash rate last week and more broadly over the last 9 months or so.
And finally, Sean, for anyone who is interested in trains, and I count myself among those people,
yes.
This story is probably not going to be a huge surprise, but the much-touted Inland Rail, which is supposed to link Brisbane and Melbourne, is in doubt.
Yes. Did you ever think it'd get built? I mean, I think it's been announced 4, 5, maybe 10 times by different governments.
Well, I didn't think it would, but then I also never thought that the second airport in Sydney would ever get built. I mean, that was kind of 60 years or so, and it's actually kind of underway.
Yeah, well, that's true. Look, a major new report on the project has raised significant concerns, apparently. Now, we haven't seen the report, but it was done by an independent panel. Government representatives yesterday said the findings were troubling, was the word they used. An independent review was ordered in October last year over concerns the project, originally was due to cost about $4.7 billion, now has a budget of $14.5 billion. The review was supposed to look at how much it would cost. It could end up costing more than $20 billion. Not sure if there's value for money in that. Maybe. I don't know.
That was a big day in politics yesterday.
Yeah, it was plenty going on. I mean, there's so much going on in corporate land at the moment. And of course, with Commonwealth Bank and Telstra and some really big results this week, I kind of figured we're going to be doing lots on results. So why not do a bit of politics to get the show going?
Now, moving on to markets, how did the local ASX perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 finished the day down just a touch, 0.2% to 7,418 points. It could have been a lot worse, actually, but for a spike late in the day. Obviously, it's all about earnings season at the moment. A number of large caps reported yesterday. We'll be talking about those in a moment. Not much good news among the top 20 or 30 stocks. All the big banks were lower, with National Australia Bank off nearly 1% to $31.38. Fortescue Metals bucked the trend. It was up 0.5%. BHP and Rio, they were lower. Woodside was really a standout, up more than 2%. Santos jumped 1.7%, so the energy companies had a good day out, while Wesfarmers dropped more than 1%.
What's happening on international markets?
Brent crude has come back a bit. It's trading around $85 a barrel. Just petrol prices are higher at the moment, Michael. Have you noticed that?
No, I don't really worry about petrol prices anymore.
Diesel.
Sean.
Tell me about diesel.
Okay, well, since you asked, it is very expensive.
Yeah, very expensive. Gold's also lower, around $1,860 an ounce. The slide in coal prices continues. About 6 months ago, coal prices were well and truly double what they are today. They're about $460 a tonne. They're about $218 a tonne yesterday. Quite incredible how much they've come back. And the Aussie dollar is buying 69 US cents.
All right, there is plenty happening. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the good news for shoppers from JB Hi-Fi's half-year result yesterday is that the retailer expects to discount more products. The bad news, though, is it will do so because it expects the economy to slow.
Yes, and that comment was enough to send its share price down 5% yesterday to $44.25. Boss Terry Smart said it's inevitable that there'll be more discounting across the industry as cost of living pressures build, and that will hit profit margins. The good news is that supply chain issues of the past couple of years seem to have almost disappeared, which of course in itself adds to competition. Sales for the December half year were strong, but Smart warned that things slowed in January, while at subsidiary Good Guys, sales were flat last month. Overall, pre-tax profit was up 15% and the group lifted its dividend by 20%.
And how about this one, Sean? The Star Entertainment Group's share price tumbled 21% to $1.48 yesterday after the group flagged a write-down of its Sydney casino of up to $1.6 billion.
Yes, an incredible fall yesterday. Three things are hurting the Star at the moment. First, the New South Wales government is proposing casino tax increases. Second, the gaming group has had to overhaul its business practices to improve governance as a result of the big inquiries out of Queensland and New South Wales. And third, it's got a new competitor in its main market, with Crown Sydney now open. The really big one, though, is the implementation of the New South Wales casino duty rate increases from 2024. Star isn't quite sure how much it will hurt the company, but somewhere between $400 million and $1.6 billion. Quite incredible. The Star doesn't report for another 9 days. Yesterday was just a prelude to the final numbers. It did say gaming revenue in Sydney was down sharply, but that has somewhat been offset by stronger turnover in Brisbane and on the Gold Coast.
Sean, clearly it's early in the profit season and cost of living pressures are really kind of already shining through, but it appears not at Endeavour Group. There is little sign of slowdown at its 1,700 bottle shops and near 350 pubs.
Recession-proof, I'd say. In fact, Chief Executive of Endeavour, Steve Donohue, pretty much said that much yesterday. He said trading just hasn't slipped in the first 5 weeks of this year. He added that pubs offer good value, and post-lockdowns, people were back in fine fettle. They're inherently social, hence everyone is back at the pub. Now, Donohue said alcohol was like the fashion industry, and one of the star performers now is Suntory 196. Now, Suntory 196, Michael, didn't exist 2 years ago.
Why do I feel like I'm about to get a lesson here?
Well, no, I had to look up what's in Suntory 196. I have no idea. I presume it's some sort of Japanese whiskey or something. I was totally wrong.
What is it?
It's vodka, soda, lemon, and a fermented liquor. I'll spell it for you. SCHOCHU.
Do you want to have an attempt at pronouncing it?
Sochu?
Sean, I have absolutely no idea if you got that correct. I do love your attempts at pronunciation, though. I remember going to hijack slightly. We had one yesterday.
Yes.
This is a slightly related note, I suppose. You were talking about, I think the line that you used was that inflation is the economic variable du jour, or perhaps for the year.
Yes.
And you were trying to figure out what the French term would be if it was the economic variable for the whole year. And you kind of stumbled around blindly for a little while trying to figure out what it was. Anyway, you put the call out for help, and Radink has written to us via LinkedIn. And he said that the correct word for year in French is spelt DE space L apostrophe ANNEE with an accent or two in there just to complicate things. So I'm not going to have a go at it. If you want to, it's up to you. But I'm declaring that I'm out of this one.
I'm happy to have a go.
Go.
Righto. So it is the economic variable de l'année. De l'année. Anyway, let's move on. Back to Endeavour Group. Look, overall profit for the last year was up 17%, mostly thanks to people returning to pubs post-COVID. While there's been a rise in beer excise, Endeavour intends to keep prices unchanged in the short term. Now, the liquor retailing arm, which is 262 Dan Murphy outlets and 1,434 BWS stores, hasn't fared quite as well since the end of lockdowns. No surprises there. Anyway, all up, Endeavour's share price finished up 4% yesterday.
Does that surprise you at all that the BWS stores outnumber the Dan Murphy outlets so significantly?
So significantly, yes, because Dan Murphy's such a big outlet. It's big box retailing, whereas BWS, there's some very small stores. One very close to me, in fact.
You know it well by the sounds of it.
I do.
All right, well, let's move on. Let's leave all of that behind us, the mispronunciations, but thank you for being a good sport, Sean. Insurer IAG's share price jumped more than 5%, which is the best of the top 200 yesterday, even though profit margins halved during the 6 months to the end of December.
Inflation is eating into the company's car and home insurance market, i.e. the cost of getting stuff fixed just costs a lot more. But IAG, which owns NRMA and CGU, said premiums in those markets were rising by double digits. The bottom line for the company was much higher than 12 months ago because IAG wrote back $252 million in provisions it had put aside during COVID, but didn't really need. Now, the company will take a $236 million hit in the current 6 months, thanks to the floods in Auckland. Chief Executive Nick Hawkins was upbeat about the year ahead.
Now, Sean, the biggest investors in the country are the superannuation funds, and where they put their money can actually move share prices. Research released yesterday shows that BHP is the number one holding of the country's largest 16 super funds.
And in terms of offshore companies, it's Microsoft. So research by the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, ASFA, and National Australia Bank show the portfolio details of the biggest default super options. So after BHP comes CSL, which is in front of Commonwealth Bank, a bit of a surprise there, the National Australia Bank and Macquarie Group, Woodside, Westpac, ANZ, Woolies and Wesfarmers, all the big names. Away from the ASX, the funds own Microsoft, we mentioned, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Visa, United Health, Meta, Tencent and Tesla. Now, we're talking about funds that have about $890 billion to manage. That's out of the $2.3 trillion managed by super funds. So it's a fair chunk of the money. And so what they do with the money can move markets. So it's just interesting to see what they like at the moment.
Property giant Lend-Lease narrowed its first half loss thanks to higher earnings from its investment business. But, Sean, it seems investors didn't really like the result. Its share price tumbled 6.1% to $7.79 yesterday.
Yes, the diversified developer, investor and landlord took a $200 million hit from a defective buildings provision. Now, that's after the UK government required developers across that country to extend the defects liability period on residential buildings from 6 to 30 years. Pretty amazing change, that one. Lend-Lease said demand for luxury apartments at its Sydney projects remains strong. The 3 towers at One Sydney Harbour were 88% pre-sold. That's about $1.4 billion worth of sales. The residential component of its planned One Circular Quay Tower was 30% pre-sold. That's about $800 million. But the group did say that it's suffering from inflation and interest rate pressures, hence its share price tumbled that much.
That is a big jump from 6 to 30 years in the UK, and makes you wonder whether there might be a precedent set there and something similar could end up happening here. That is a big, big change.
Yeah, that would certainly get the construction industry antsy.
Yeah, sure would. Now, Horizon is a massive transport company hauling coal and other products from mines to ports, but heavy rain and flooding hit the company hard in the final 6 months of 2022.
Yes, profit was cut in half and full-year earnings guidance from the company has been downgraded. I like this company. You don't think much about it, but sometimes when you're driving out in the country and you see these massive trains hauling coal and things like that, often that is Horizon. Basically, coal haulage volumes are down. Also, they rent out their tracks. Other companies use their rail tracks. That's fallen sharply too because of the weather. As a result, not a good 6 months for Horizon, and its share price finished down 6.5% yesterday.
Sean, in international news, tens of thousands of homes in northern New Zealand are without electricity as Cyclone Gabrielle hit the country, bringing high winds and intense rainfall.
Yes, the centre of the storm is expected to be off the coast of Auckland later today, possibly early tomorrow. Officials are warning people to be ready for high seas and storm surges, surface flooding, falling trees and landslides. Some residents in low-lying areas north of Auckland and along the east coast have been urged to evacuate. Yesterday, Trans-Tasman flights were suspended. We all just hope things work out okay there.
Sean, the United States Navy and Marine Corps are holding joint exercises in the South China Sea, really at a time of heightened tensions with Beijing over the shooting down of a suspected Chinese spy balloon.
The 7th Fleet based in Japan said that the US says Nimitz Aircraft Carrier Strike Group and the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit had been conducting integrated expeditionary strike force operations in the South China Sea, according to Associated Press. Now, China claims virtually the entire South China Sea for itself. It strongly objects to military activity by other nations in the contested waterway, through which about $5 trillion worth of goods are shipped every year. The exercises, which were planned in advance, come amid already tense relations between Washington and Beijing that obviously have been exacerbated by the diplomatic row sparked by the balloon, which was shot down last week off the coast of South Carolina. It just seems on this story, it's getting more prickly, that relationship between the two countries.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Finally, Sean, the Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles came down to the final minute with the Chiefs winning, but the big news came out of the ads that run during the game.
Yeah, they are ridiculously expensive. And do you know what was missing this year? Crypto ads.
Oh, there were heaps last year.
Yeah, so last year about $39 million worth of crypto ads ran during Super Bowl. This year, zero. Doesn't that just show you just how far cryptos have fallen? Instead, there were beer ads. There's always beer ads. Chip ads. There were movie ads. There were celebrity cameos, seem to be left, right and centre, mostly sort of in a nostalgic sense. And in fact, there's a couple of ads promoting Jesus Christ with the tagline, "He gets us." They were pretty much the surprise packet, I would say, of the Super Bowl.
Oh, every year for me, the highlight is the ads, and I always go and watch them all afterwards. And the highlight for me, and I know everyone's hanging out to hear what my highlight was, but it was one for Workday, which is a workplace software for accounting, that kind of thing. But it was a campaigning against people in a business environment calling each other rock stars. And so they had kind of Kiss and Ozzy Osbourne and everyone, like real rock stars, kind of cracking down on people in the corporate space using the term rock star to describe each other. Very good. Definitely worth going and checking out. Also the General Motors EV ad with Will Ferrell is very good as well.
Actually, I think the General Motors EV one was the best.
Yeah, it was a ripper. Anyway, Sean, I think that's pretty much covered us for today. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Cameron Harris, Global Leader of Flight Centre Business Travel.
All about corporate travel, very interesting sector at the moment, and it's returning with gusto.
Yes, indeed. Now, Flight Centre, great supporters of Fear and Greed and great supporters of small business in general. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Sean, did you have a go of Tradle, the game that I was talking about yesterday?
You know the funny thing, I tried to use Tradle and I couldn't get onto it without finding myself with a malware group trying to offer a sale to me. So I probably just need to spend a little bit more time. And then I ended up at Wordle. And so in short, it's probably my inability to click the right button, but no, I didn't.
Okay. Well, anyone else, highly recommended. It's the Wordle variant that's based on kind of international trade. So it's a very Fear and Greed kind of game. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 14th of February, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.